Did you know that about 70% of employees are disengaged at work? That's a staggering number. When people feel unheard and undervalued, they often check out mentally, which hurts both their productivity and the company's bottom line. Yet, there's a powerful solution that many leaders overlook: servant leadership. You might think servant leadership means being soft or overly nice, but it's actually much more complex. In fact, studies show that companies with servant leadership see 50% higher employee retention and 60% more engagement. These leaders don't just manage, they inspire, empower, and listen. In this video, we'll dive deep into what servant leadership really is and what it isn't. We'll explore its surprising origins, bust some common myths, and reveal the strategies that set servant leaders apart from the rest. Get ready to discover how leading from the heart can actually drive business success and create a thriving workplace. Trust me, you won't want to miss this. Chapter 1. The Untold Origins of Servant Leadership. You may think servant leadership is a modern concept, but it actually dates back centuries. The term was first coined by Robert K. Greenleaf in his 1970 essay, The Servant as Leader. Greenleaf was inspired by Hermann Hesse's story, Journey to the East, where a servant named Leo quietly leads a group without them even realizing it. However, the roots of servant leadership go back even further. Ancient philosophers like Lao Tzu and religious figures such as Jesus Christ modeled leadership through service. Lao Tzu famously said, "A leader is best when people barely know he exists." What makes this leadership style so powerful is that it focuses on empowering others. Data shows that companies with servant leadership principles have 50% higher employee retention rates and report 60% more engagement from their teams compared to traditional leadership models. By putting others first, servant leaders build loyal and motivated teams. One example is Starbucks. Howard Schultz, the former CEO, emphasized the well-being of employees, or partners, as they are called, over profit margins. This approach has been credited with helping Starbucks weather tough economic times. The strategy here is clear: prioritize your team's growth, and the results will follow. Chapter 2. Myths busted. Servant leadership isn't about being nice. A common myth about servant leadership is that it's all about being nice or people-pleasing. That couldn't be further from the truth. Servant leaders make tough decisions and set firm boundaries. It's not about being soft, it's about being strong enough to put the needs of the team first. Simon Sinek, author of Leaders Eat Last, talks about how servant leadership is rooted in creating a safe environment for teams. When people feel safe, they trust, and when they trust, they cooperate, Sinek explains. This doesn't mean avoiding hard conversations or conflict. In fact, servant leaders lean into those moments to build stronger teams. A study by Gallup found that employees who feel their leaders care about their personal well-being are 27% more likely to stay with the company. But here's the key: caring doesn't mean coddling. Servant leaders are willing to have difficult conversations and make decisions that may not be popular but are best for the team in the long run. Take Southwest Airlines, for instance. Former CEO Herb Kelleher built a culture where employees came first, but he wasn't afraid to be direct and firm when needed. His leadership style, though rooted in service, was also about setting clear expectations and holding people accountable. Chapter 3. The dark side of being too selfless. While servant leadership is about prioritizing others, it's important to strike a balance. Being too selfless can actually backfire. Servant leaders need to set boundaries to avoid burnout and protect their own well-being. Research from the Harvard Business Review found that leaders who prioritize others over themselves often experience higher levels of exhaustion. This is why it's essential for servant leaders to be aware of their limits. You can't pour from an empty cup. A quote that sums this up well comes from Brené Brown, who says, "Daring leaders work to make sure people can be themselves and feel a sense of belonging, but they don't ignore their own needs in the process." Servant leaders must practice self-care and recognize that their health is essential to the success of the team. The key strategy here is maintaining balance. You can be a servant leader without sacrificing yourself. By learning to delegate and empowering others to take ownership, you create a team that thrives without needing to carry the burden on your own shoulders. One practical example of this is Microsoft's Satya Nadella. He transformed the company culture by focusing on empathy and servant leadership, but he also made sure to lead with clarity and purpose. Nadella sets boundaries and encourages his teams to take initiative, knowing that servant leadership isn't about being a martyr, it's about lifting others while also standing strong. If you find this information valuable, don't forget to subscribe. Stay tuned for more insights on leadership and how to make a difference in your organization. Chapter 4. Why servant leaders secretly lead from the shadows. Servant leadership isn't about grabbing the spotlight. In fact, the most effective servant leaders are often working quietly behind the scenes. The goal is to empower others to succeed rather than hogging the credit. Robert Greenleaf, who popularized the concept, emphasized that servant leaders don't seek recognition. They prioritize the growth and well-being of their teams over their own visibility. This strategy is what makes them stand out, even though they aren't always in the limelight. Think about how some of the most effective leaders you know work. They're not the loudest or most charismatic in the room. Instead, they focus on making sure their team has what they need to excel. A survey by the Center for Creative Leadership found that 88% of executives agree that humility and listening are key traits in great leaders. A great example is Jim Sinegal, co-founder of Costco. Sinegal wasn't flashy or seeking media attention, but he was a master at putting his employees first. He quietly implemented policies that gave his workers great benefits and fair wages, building one of the most loyal workforces in retail. His leadership was about quietly paving the way for others to succeed. Servant leaders often spend their time mentoring and developing others. They don't need to be the face of every success because they find satisfaction in watching others grow. The key takeaway here? Lead by example, lift others up, and let their success speak for itself. Chapter 5. The power of listening first. Leadership. One of the core strategies of servant leadership is listening. And not just passive listening, but active, engaged listening. Servant leaders put a strong emphasis on hearing what their teams have to say before making decisions. This builds trust and fosters collaboration. According to a study by the Harvard Business Review, leaders who excel at listening see a 20% increase in team performance. Why? Because when people feel heard, they're more likely to be engaged, motivated, and innovative. Listening signals that their input matters, which boosts morale. This is where the real strength of servant leadership shines. Instead of dictating from the top, servant leaders listen first and then respond. This creates a culture of openness and mutual respect. Ken Blanchard, author of The Servant Leader, says, "Servant leadership is about making sure that other people's highest priority needs are being met. This happens when leaders make time to truly listen." One company that thrives on this strategy is Zappos. Their leadership team is trained to listen and adapt based on employee feedback. This open communication has been credited with Zappos' high levels of employee satisfaction and retention. By practicing deep listening, servant leaders not only solve immediate problems but also identify opportunities for long-term growth. The key takeaway here? Before making decisions, stop and listen. You'll be surprised at the insight you gain from your team. Chapter 6. Servant leadership. The ultimate competitive edge in today's world. In today's fast-paced and competitive environment, servant leadership might seem too slow or soft for success. But the truth is, it's a strategy that creates long-lasting competitive advantages. Companies led by servant leaders tend to outperform their peers in areas like innovation, employee loyalty, and customer satisfaction. A study by the University of Illinois found that businesses using servant leadership principles had 32% higher revenue growth compared to their competitors. Why? Because employees who feel valued and supported are more productive and creative. This leads to better products, services, and overall business success. Consider the example of the Container Store. Their CEO, Kip Tindall, embraced servant leadership by treating employees as the company's most valuable asset. The result? The Container Store consistently ranks as one of the best places to work, and their customer service is top tier. Another big player is Marriott International. Former CEO Bill Marriott said, Take care of your employees, and they'll take care of the guests. This simple philosophy has helped Marriott become one of the most successful hotel chains in the world. Servant leadership isn't just a feel-good approach, it drives results. The strategy here is clear. Put people first, and success will follow. In a world where employee turnover is costly and customer loyalty is hard to maintain, servant leadership offers a sustainable path to growth. It's not about quick wins, it's about building a culture that fosters long-term success. Thank you for joining us on this journey through servant leadership. If you found these insights helpful, please subscribe to our channel for more engaging content that can transform your leadership style and workplace culture.